Hi, everyone. Welcome back to this week's DBT skill web series. I am Samantha, and I will be guiding you through our web series today. So, we are going to start with our opening mindfulness exercise. Then we'll move through our homework review and just reviewing what we covered in our last video. And then we will move forward with our new skill for today. So, for our opening mindfulness practice, you will need something to write with, as well as some sort of paper to jot down your reflections and responses. So, this could be a post it note, a scrapbook paper, a journal you have on hand, anything that's readily available to you. So, if you need a moment to go grab those things, go ahead and pause this video and then hit play when you're back. Okay, so we are going to do an emotion-based mindfulness exercise today, where I'm going to share my screen and we are going to use what I call the picker wheel to select an emotion. Once we select that emotion, I have a few questions that I'm going to pull up on the whiteboard for us to respond and reflect on. We'll probably do this with about 2 different emotions just to get a feel for practicing this. Okay, so I'm going to pull up our picker wheel to select our first emotion. I will also do an example with you as well, so you see what this looks like. Anxious. Okay, I am, stop sharing for a second. All right, so our first emotion that we're going to discuss is anxiety. I'm going to pull up the whiteboard with our questions. So in a moment here, you should see 3 different reflection questions. The first is, what do you feel in your body when you feel this emotion? So I'm going to, again, do this with you right now. So when I feel anxious, I often feel like a pit in my stomach, maybe some tension. I often will feel tightness in my chest. I sometimes also just feel like restless in my body where I'm like moving and fidgeting around. Sometimes I feel like urges in my legs to move my legs or walk around. So that's often how I feel when I feel anxious. What color best represents this emotion? Ooh, I would say when it comes to anxiety, I would select maybe orange, something bright and something like that captures that emotion for me. And then the last time I felt this emotion, I would say I'm recording this in the winter. And I recently was driving, I guess the other day when it was snowing, and I felt anxious driving in the snow when the weather is really not great and the roads were slippery. So I felt anxious and just wanting to get to my destination safely. So go ahead and take a few moments to answer these questions for yourself when it comes to anxiety. Go ahead and pause this video too, so you can have some time to do that. Okay, now that you're back, we are going to do this one more time through with another emotion. So I'm going to close this out here for a moment. I'm going to bring us back to our picker wheel. All right, and I'm just going to pick up another emotion. Joy. Awesome. Okay, stop sharing. I'm going to bring up our questions again. Just give it one moment to load. Okay, so same questions. I'm going to do this alongside with you as well. So, what do you feel in your body when you feel joy? Oftentimes, I get like that butterfly feeling in my stomach. I feel like warm in my body. I feel like also very relaxed, like in my face and just overall in my body. Like I don't notice any tension in my jaw or anything. Like I just feel really relaxed when I feel a sense of joy. What color best represents this emotion? I want to say purple for me. And I don't know if I have any specific explanation for purple, but I feel like it's just a color that makes me feel a sense of joy. And then when was the last time you felt this emotion? Again, I'm recording this in the winter time and in 2025, and the Eagles won the Super Bowl last week. So I felt like an immense sense of joy with that win and that celebration with friends and family, and just getting to experience a lot of like spirit in the city and excitement. So that was the last time I felt joy. And then again, I want you to reflect on these questions as well. So take some time to write your responses down. Go ahead and pause so you can have a few moments to jot your thoughts down. All right. So I want you to just reflect, what was this like to practice responding to these questions about specific emotions, and actually pretty opposite emotions, anxiety and joy. What was it like to think of a color that represents those emotions? And even reflecting on like the last time you felt that emotion. I noticed for what showed up for me was it was just like helpful to reflect on those things. I think sometimes we feel a lot of different emotions throughout our day, throughout our week. So just being able to slow down and have some time to reflect on what I actually felt recently was just nice. And it brought some more like attention and awareness to those emotions and experiences. All right. Thank you for engaging in this. I'm going to stop sharing this now. And then I'm going to bring us back to our workbook, where I'm going to do a quick recap on what we covered last week. Okay. So last week we began our new module, emotion regulation. We talked about the goals of this module. So really briefly, like understanding and labeling your emotions, decreasing the frequency of unwanted emotions, like how often you feel uncomfortable emotions, decreasing emotional vulnerability by taking care of ourselves. And we're going to talk about that specifically in a few weeks. And then overall, trying to work on decreasing our emotional suffering. We talked about things that make it hard to regulate our emotions. So, what kind of gets in the way of us being able to confidently manage our emotions? So, it could be beliefs about emotions. We talked about some emotion myths, lack of skill. We just don't know what to do. Could be biology. We're just more highly sensitive. Could just be general moodiness, especially being a teenager. There's a lot of changes going on in our lives and our bodies, and it's just can really impact how we feel and our mood overall. And then your environment may reinforce emotion dysregulation. We also talked about what emotions do for us. So they communicate to us, they communicate to other people, and they can motivate us for change or action. So, over for home practice, we talked about like reflecting on our goals for this module, as well as challenging some of our beliefs about emotions. So, want you to reflect on what it was like to challenge some of our beliefs about emotions, the thoughts and beliefs we might hold about emotions or that have been passed down to us from family members, from peers, or from people at school. What was that like for you? If you have any specific challenges with this, because this is, I think, challenging some of our beliefs about emotions does take some time. It is not something that we wake up the next day and having completely different beliefs about emotions. It's something that we have to continuously practice. So, if there were some barriers or challenges, I do encourage you to bring this up in your individual therapy sessions, it's probably a really great place to dive deeper into some of those core beliefs or values that you might hold that you'll be able to like process a little bit more and challenge a little bit more in that space. Okay, so this leads us to our next skill. Oh, let me go back up here. We're going to talk about the model of emotions today. And this really aligns with the goal of being able to better understand and label our emotions. So, if you are somebody that really does struggle with understanding what you're feeling or experiencing and being able to put a name to it, this skill is going to be really helpful for you. This essentially breaks down our emotional experience. It better helps us understand what are the things that make up an emotion. This skill is language to describe, label, and put into words your emotional experiences. There's 5 different parts that make up an emotion. And this is what we're going to talk about more in depthly, but this is the what to know here. There's a prompting event. So a prompting event is something that kind of like kickstarts the whole experience, right? It's the thing that puts the play into motion, puts the emotion into action here. I'm almost thinking since I referenced the Super Bowl earlier, it makes me think like when you start a new drive, right? It starts with that kickoff experience, right? So you that's the prompting event that like starts the whole like drive for a team. This can be something inside or outside of ourselves that prompts an emotion. The next one is interpretations. So this kind of goes back to those emotion myths a little bit, but this is our thoughts and again, that thoughts and beliefs about the prompting event. How are we making sense of the prompting event? So when I said this could be something regarding emotion myths, I meant more of beliefs, like our thoughts. So our thoughts surrounding the prompting event, how we make sense of it. Next is our body sensations and experiences. So this is all like how we feel in our body, the biological changes, physical sensations, excuse me, how we're experiencing this. So when we practice this in our opening mindfulness, we're reflecting on how we felt in our bodies when we were feeling that emotion, right? So this might be like tension in our chest, or we might feel really like hot or sweaty. Like those are the body sensations. The next is emotional expression. So, how we are expressing this emotion. So, this is through our facial expressions, our words, our actions, how we are communicating this emotion to other people. And the last one is after effects. So, this is how this impacted you in the short and long term. What happened as you're starting to come down from this emotion? What are some of the after effects, right? Does this impact your ability to go and do things? Do you find yourself ruminating on this experience for a prolonged time? Are there any long term impacts to you experiencing this emotion? And we will get to go into this a little bit in a deeper dive and practice, which leads me to how to practice this. So, we're going to practice in a moment by filling in the blanks below to practice identifying a recent emotion that you've experienced. And we're going to walk through the example first. Try looking up ways other people describe this emotion. So, this is something else you can do, or even having conversations with other people. Hey, how do you feel when you feel frustrated? What shows up for you? Or what is this emotion like for you? We all have different experiences. There might be some overlap, there could be similarities, but we all have different experiences in our bodies and our beliefs about emotions. So, it can be helpful to just have that open dialogue with other people. And then another great thing, and it's going to be later in our workbook that I will reference, is looking up an emotion wheel. An emotion wheel is really helpful for us to be able to, again, have that like language for emotions because of course, we have our most common emotions, right? Of like happiness or anxiety or sadness and anger. And there are even more specific emotions. So there might be we might feel sad, but sad might not really encompass all of it, like exactly what we're feeling. So there might be another emotion in that like category or in that family of emotions, right? So maybe you're feeling actually really lonely and it might mirror some sadness and it might like you might experience common body sensations that we feel sad, but sad might not really encompass everything that we're feeling and it might be actually loneliness. Okay. So here's an example. So we start off with a prompting event. So the prompting event example here is getting a failing test grade. The next one is interpretation. We might have the interpretation of what is wrong with me? I am such a failure. I am so dumb. This leads to emotional experience and emotional expressions. So you might notice here that these arrows go both ways. And that's because oftentimes the emotional experience and the expression can happen at the same time. They can be interchangeable. It doesn't have to follow a linear like this or this cycle of this happens first and then this. Like they can happen at the same time. So that is why you'll see the arrows go both ways here. So, emotional experience, you might notice that your teeth are clenching and your jaw's clenching. Maybe you feel a tightness in your chest, your palms are getting really sweaty. And then you're expressing this by crying, walking away, and withdrawing from others, kind of shutting yourself out from other people and friends and peers. Okay, after effects. And this actually, the arrow should be pointing the other way. So I apologize for that error. But the after effects, an example here could be ruminating on the situation, right? Overthinking, what did I do wrong? Why didn't I study longer? You're really stuck in these cycles of thoughts. And maybe another after effect is predicting it will happen again. I'm never going to be able to pull my test grade up or my math scores up, and just thinking that this is how it's always going to be. All right. So I want you to take a moment to pause this video and go through your own cycle. It's okay if you don't know exactly what emotion you're feeling, but maybe just start with an experience that you recently encountered. Start with the prompting event and go through like, how did you make sense of that? What did you feel in your body? How did you express that emotion? And what after effects? And then, so sometimes when we're not even sure how we felt, filling in this cycle and answering these prompts gives us more evidence and clues to be like, oh, maybe I felt really frustrated, or maybe I felt really happy. Maybe I felt this. And so it helps us be able to label it a little bit. So go ahead, use like the scrapbook or scrap paper journal that you have on hand and write some of these things out. Pause the video so you can have this up and it doesn't move. And then when you're ready, you can come back, return, and hit the play button. All right. Let's talk a little bit more and give an example. Emotions feel confusing for Haley, who uses she, they pronouns. She has a difficult time understanding and labeling her emotions and often feels distressed, not being able to accurately identify what she is feeling. This is common for folks when they are experiencing emotional overload. It can be difficult to figure out what you are feeling. Haley was able to start step by step with her therapist using the graph on the previous page. It took some time and practice, but Haley now feels more confident in being able to recognize when she is feeling sad versus when she is feeling shame. What emotions are difficult for you to understand? What gets in the way of labeling your emotions? So, again, I want you to go ahead and reflect on that. Take a few moments, pause the video, jot some notes down. All right. Curious what emotions are difficult for you to process. And this, again, these questions are, and how you responded, I think will be really helpful for you to bring into individual therapy so that you can talk about like what emotions are really hard for you to talk about. What gets in the way of being able to identify them and being able to have that space to like further process and explore that. Okay. This is an example of an emotion wheel that I was talking about. You don't have to use a specific one. If you go to Google and type in emotion wheels, you're going to get a lot of different variations of it. So you can choose one that you really like. But I like that it starts with some core emotions here, right? And then it's color coded to give more specific emotions that are in that family. So you'll see in this, like, I guess, like yellowish, greenish color here. It starts with joy and then it gets more specific, like proud or hopeful. So that's like how that works is like it stems from more core emotion and then it gets like more detailed and specific. Same thing with like anger. You'll see that like jealous falls under there, resentful, annoyed. So those are all in the same family. So I think the emotion wheel can be really helpful being able to just reflect on what it is that you're actually feeling. All right, this brings us to our home practice. So here are some examples of how you can practice a skill on your own, with a friend, or a caregiver. So by yourself, when faced with a strong emotional response, pause and ask yourself, what am I experiencing in my body? How am I communicating this emotion to myself and others? Write your responses down. You can do this with a peer by sharing a recent emotional experience with your friend. Ask how they have experienced the same emotion. Discuss the similarities and differences with experiencing that emotion. Talk to a caregiver about how they describe and label their emotions. Notice the difference and similarities you have with your parent. That's one way you can practice with your caregiver. All right. And then filling this part out and this portion out for your home practice. So being able to first reflect on what it was like to label your emotions with yourself, a peer, or a parent this week. Was it effective? What did you notice? What was different when trying this out? And then writing your emotions out before and after. Like, how did it feel? Um, so that concludes our model of emotions for today. I really hope that you can take this skill and really be able to have some time to sit and practice being able to label the different parts of the emotion to better understand your emotional experiences. This can be a really helpful tool to be able to slow down and recognize our own signs and signals of different emotions. All right, so thanks for watching this video, and we will be back with next week's video. Take care.